Okay, so I'm going to start off with an image that's 3000 by 2000 pixels, resolution 300. That's kind of the standard if you're doing a commission or anything, in case anyone needs to print it out. Have a new layer. I don't really know what I'm going to draw. I'm just going to draw something, you know. So just picking my color, make my brush a little bit bigger. Turn down my opacity, because I want that, you know, sketchy state, so I like that. I'm just gonna use that quickly. Okay. So, let's just draw a dragon. So, start with my circle. I always do this just because I want to figure out the direction that I want to point the head. So, I'm gonna get my eye placement. Once I know my eye placement, I can, you know, figure out, okay, here we go. There we go. This is just going to be basic, whatever, right? So, usually I actually always draw with a line because I feel like I'm not at that level where I can just put color down and that's it. But one tip is if you are doing an environment, generally you want to pick, okay, like I want to do, sorry, maybe I want to do like a nighttime scene, so like my snowing icons. I want to pick my color first, because I'll just show you in a second. Let's do this. Okay, like if I know my background color, that will help you understand and move your color palette towards that nighttime scene. But I'm not going to be doing any environments. I'm just going to show you just a quick basic, this is how I do my stuff and what have you. So I'm going to just pick black for my color, get my brush. I work kind of small. I mean, I'm working on a Cintiq, so it makes it easier if I want to have like smaller or bigger line weights. Get my line in here. I'm not going to worry about teeth and stuff like that, because again, it's like a basic tutorial, I guess. And one thing when you're doing line work, especially if you're creating art for someone else and it's not just like a normal sketch, you want to actually be pretty picky about your line weights and line quality, because the fact of the matter is, if you're drawing stuff for people or you're just drawing stuff for yourself but you want to make it higher caliber, you want to show that every aspect you're drawing you care about. So just like clean up your edges and you know, just try and smooth them out a little bit more. And again, like line weight is actually a really nice touch. If it's, you know, if you're going to keep line into your drawing, you want to have line weight. It just makes all that more pleasing. How you want to do line weight is completely up to you. I generally don't try to make it random. Like if I come to an edge, I'll maybe make it a little bit thicker. You know, make it thick, taper off with your eraser. And it is a little bit more time consuming, but it's totally worth it in the end. It just adds that quality. You know, so for some people they'll add line weight on the bottom of everything. So for example, like just make it thicker at the bottom of the jaw, make it thicker on the bottom of the upper jaw, make it thicker on the bottom of the eye because it's like, I don't know, the shadows. I don't really like doing that. I kind of just base it off of my angles just to add more weight. I don't know. Blah blah blah. I'm just kind of winging this as I'm going along. I'm not very good at explaining how I do things, so I'm hoping by at least you being able to watch this, then you'll kind of see. But anyway, so you get the idea. Let's okay, so let's make this dragon red. I don't usually go straight up here. Like if you're going to pick your colors, you want to go more deeper. I'm just going to check that quickly. Yeah, you want to go more of a deep color because it gives you more variety on your range of brightness and darkness and stuff. I'll show you. But anyway, so I'm just going to do a layer called base. Color this in. Like, I know how to use Photoshop and stuff, and I have my own methods, but this isn't necessarily the best method. I'm sure there's other faster methods out there, but this is kind of just what works for me, and yeah. So if you need to clean up around your edges, because obviously I've kind of gone out of the lines and stuff like that, you can actually just go straight to your line art layer and just magic wand around there and set your tolerance, I think, to 0. And it'll be the absolute closest to the line as possible. Do I have a hole somewhere? But anyway, and then you want to go back to your base layer. I cut out the neck by accident, so you got to be careful about stuff like that. Usually, like if you do it that way, you're still going to have to kind of zoom in and clean up your edges because it will show. And so I'm just going to, I'm just going to clean up my edges a bit here. So anyway, now that I have my base in, I'm just going to make another layer for the mouth. Layers are free. They're a little bit time consuming sometimes, you know, but if it means keeping your layers more organized and your colors, then by all means. But if you feel more comfortable and confident in your work and you want less layers, then, you know, to each their own. I'm just going to make the mouth and the eyes the same color. Okay, so now what you want to do is with your base color you want to lock it. So this checkerboard kind of icon, lock it, so now I can just kind of do whatever. So, color picking. I want to work on my shadows first. I like figuring out my light direction with the shadows. Now you can use kind of whatever brush you want, but I pulled one of my brushes from CS3 that I actually really like to use. I'm just going to lay it down. I'm going to have the light coming from the top. And if you hear chirping, that's just my MSN. I'll be typing here and there, so you'll have to forgive me. Like right now. Don't worry about going overboard with your shading because you can always go back and clean it up. I just like to get the overall base in there where I generally want my shadows. So now what I'm going to do, grab my red, start kind of cleaning up a little bit. And what helps with transitioning too is if you get your eyedropper tool and you kind of just grab a color that's in between the two that you're working with, you can kind of, you know, slowly make that nice smoother transition. I'm going to turn my opacity down a little bit with this brush. And even if it's like top lighting, like coming down, I still added a bit of, you know, kind of like the line weight, I've added a little bit of weight around the beak of the nose, and then I'm just going to go in and soften it. It just adds to form, even if it's technically still lit. Just adds that roundness. And of course, the closer your light source is to your form, the harder the shadows are going to be. I'm just doing an overall neutral lighting, so I am going to soften the edges, but the neck to the head is really close, so I'm actually going to keep the edges more solid and just kind of soften the edges around the roundness of the neck, the curvature. You know, there's probably proper terminology for all this, but I can't remember it right now, so, you know, you can kind of see what I'm doing anyway. Probably get it, hopefully. This muscle's a little bit more softer, so I'm not going to make it too dark. Now, if you want to darken your shadows a little bit more, you can go in and, you know, do what you want. So what I'm going to do right now is, because all my shadows are kind of the same tone right now, just kind of darken it up in here a bit. Again, I'm going to eyedrop the original color, add a little bit more transition there. Maybe add a little bit more form under here. Now I'm just going to do a little bit of dark right here. What is it? Bounce light or fill light or whatever. I have my darker shadow reflecting back in here. So it's never just going to be one tone, dark and light. It's always going to be, there's so many different tones of your shadow, which obviously you can experiment by, if you set up a environment like an apple, or just something like plain colored like an orange that's generally one tone, and you set it up under light, you're going to find there will be like kind of a rim of darker shadow, but then there's that bounce light that comes back and kind of reflects. Anyway, this is just neutral lighting, but if your lighting is more orange or whatever, then you want to try and add those colors into your shadows. And generally it just all depends on what environment you're in, you know, all that sort of stuff, atmospheric. I'm trying to make myself sound like I know what I'm doing. Okay, I think I'm just going to done playing around with shadows right now. Let's work on the brightness. So again, I didn't go all the way up here when I put down my base color, so I'm going to just kind of And notice how when I picked the color, I still kind of went towards the white rather than full out red. And it all just depends on the look you're going for. Sometimes it works in certain situations, other times it doesn't. Just leave it up to your artistic eye. So I'm just going to move on to the mouth. Because again, I'm not really, just going to do the basics here. So I'm just moving on to like a harder brush of full opacity just to have a little bit of shine. Now this isn't pure white. It's a very white of the color. Very white version of the color, but not completely white. If you want to add a little bit more twinkle, use your white, but very sparingly. Okay, so here's the trick of having line work but subduing it so it kind of looks like it's not there, or it's just enough that it's part of the picture that it's just blends very well. So you're going to go to your line work layer. Again, check off your checkered icon so that it's locked off. And I just kind of grab colors that match the base or whatever's going on with the shading at that moment. I'm just switching back to my brush. And then you just kind of want to lighten everything. I generally avoid coloring around the eye unless it works, like maybe make it a bit darker. Again, just use your eyes and figure out what looks the best. Can't screw this up because you can just select black and fill it back in again and start over if that's what you need to do. I'm going to do the mouth. Slightly darker brown than the darkest in there. Color the tongue. Inside the mouth. I'm going to keep around the edge of the mouth red. I could do it brown, but I just don't really like that. So there's a little bit more to this than just coloring the line. You kind of want to shade the line as well. So where your hot spots are, you'll want to grab a lighter red and just kind of I find sometimes this works in the environment, sometimes it doesn't. You just kind of have to play around with it. Like some of the icons, I left some parts black because it just looked better that way. And it's good for softening your edges of your line. See how it kind of, there's a bit of line there, but I soften the edges so it disappears a bit more. Basically, I just try to match it to the shading so it looks more like form rather than just a line there. And then I still want that little smile line, so I'm just going to grab this, do this, and kind of just taper it a bit. This is too dark, so I'm going to go in and lighten that up a bit. Because the tongue is shiny, I don't mind actually making the line more prominent with the white. Well, not white, but lighter color. That's okay. But because now the line is colored in, the mouth still looks a little bit flat, so you might want to go back and just add a little bit more to it. But again, you don't want just one shadow. shade, tone, whatever, you know. You want to try and add variation in there to make it more interesting. And because the tongue is in fact wet, try not to go overboard on this, because I think a lot of people abuse shine and think it looks kind of cool, but at the same time it's not really that great. Kind of just depends what you're going for, but I just think it's abused. Again, a lighter color, and it wouldn't totally go into the mouth. It might if it's reflected. And then just go not quite full white, but enough. And don't fill it in completely, just a little bit down the middle. You don't even have to fill in all the dots. And if you just want it that much brighter, go white as your very last, but just a touch. So you don't want it distracting. It is a little bit distracting, I admit. So if you want to tone it down a little bit, you can always just soften it with your brush. And there we go. So there you have it. I mean, again, this is simple, but the principles that I basically do my works in are all here. You know, I mean, if I turn off my line, it looks pretty sloppy, but if you don't want to do line, generally if I'm going to do completely lineless work, because I do it, I still put in my line. I wouldn't necessarily color it, but just slowly turn down the opacity, and then you can start going in and cleaning up your edges. But you want to shade it so that it has form, because, for example, let's just turn that off completely. This does look really sloppy, but if you want to make a definition, you still kind of, to me anyway, I feel like you still kind of need a line. So I'm going to grab a red, a little bit darker, not too much, and just shade it in. Turn the opacity up a bit. Let's turn my line back on. And there you have it. If you're not used to, or you don't feel confident enough that you want to go completely lineless, have your line draw it really nicely, and then go back in afterwards by locking it, and then kind of just color it in. And keep it close to your shading, but enough that it's there, and but not, you know, you got the idea. Anyway. Hopefully that helps. If not, it always just takes practice, and don't be afraid to experiment and try new things, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay, because again, it's all about practice and getting used to the program and all that fun stuff. Anyway, yeah, hope it